3 signs someone will betray you. What psychology actually says. You've already been betrayed, or you will be. And the cruelest part, that person was giving you signals the whole time. You just didn't know where to look. Until today. Today, I'm going to show you 3 behavioral patterns that psychology links to untrustworthy and exploitative behavior in close relationships. This isn't intuition or guesswork. These are patterns backed by research, and once you see them, you can't unsee them. Let's get into it. My name's Elijah. I've spent 26 years working with people navigating some of the hardest relational crises you can imagine: broken friendships, workplace betrayals, collapsed trust in marriages. Betrayal is consistently one of the most psychologically damaging things my clients go through, and here's what I've noticed across all those years: it almost never comes out of nowhere. People who betray others have consistent behavioral patterns, ways of thinking, feeling, and building relationships that make betrayal, in hindsight, almost predictable. Important caveat before we dive in: none of these signs alone make someone a bad person. Humans are complex, and these patterns can exist for many reasons. But when you see 2 or 3 of them consistently over time, that's a signal worth taking seriously. Sign number 1, chronic emotional dysregulation. The first sign is chronic emotional dysregulation, and I want to be precise here because this isn't just about someone having a bad temper or going through a hard season. I'm talking about a stable, recurring pattern. The person swings between extremes: warm and loving one day, explosive or withdrawn the next, with no clear external trigger and no real repair afterward. Here's what's actually happening in the brain. We have a structure called the limbic system, our emotional processing center, and at its core is the amygdala, which acts like an alarm system for perceived threat. In a regulated person, the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for impulse control, long-term thinking, and evaluating consequences, keeps that alarm in check. Neuroscientist Amy Arnstein's research at Yale has shown that under conditions of high emotional arousal, the prefrontal cortex's regulatory grip significantly weakens. Joseph Ledoux's work on fear and threat response supports the same picture. In plain language, when someone is emotionally flooded, the part of their brain that asks, "What will this cost me and the people I care about?" essentially goes offline. For you, in a relationship with such a person, this means in a moment of high stress, temptation, or self-interest, they may act in ways that sacrifice your well-being or your trust, not out of calculated malice, but because their internal regulation system simply can't hold the weight of the moment. What to watch for? Dramatic, unpredictable mood swings with no proportional cause. Not "he has rough days," but polar shifts that leave you constantly recalibrating. That's the marker. Sign number 2, manipulative victimhood combined with exploitative traits. The second sign is subtler and honestly harder to spot because it's wrapped in something that looks a lot like vulnerability. It's the person who is always the victim, always. Something is always wrong, everyone is always against them, life is always harder for them than for anyone else, and yet they never take responsibility for their own circumstances, ever. Now, important pause. Victimhood as a coping pattern can be the result of real trauma, real hardship. It's not automatically manipulative. I want to be fair here. What makes it dangerous is when this pattern combines with an exploitative orientation toward other people. In psychology, there's a well-researched framework called the dark triad, 3 personality traits that researchers Delroy Paulus and Kevin Williams described in a landmark 2002 study: narcissism, Machiavellianism, and psychopathy. People who score high on these traits consistently show a tendency to treat others as instruments for their own goals rather than as people with their own needs and worth. You don't need to be a clinician to spot the practical version of this. The key question is whether the relationship is fundamentally reciprocal. Ask yourself, in the past month, how many times was this person present for you without me asking, without it benefiting them in some obvious way? If the answer is almost never, that asymmetry is the signal. When the moment comes to choose between your interests and theirs, and that moment always comes, they'll have very little internal friction making that choice, because to them, the relationship was always primarily transactional. Sign 3. Asymmetric self-disclosure. The third sign is the most subtle, and the one most people completely miss. It's called asymmetric self-disclosure. Here's how it plays out. You talk. You share your fears, your history, your dreams, your insecurities, and they listen warmly, attentively. But when you think about what you actually know about them on a deep level, almost nothing. They keep things surface level. Personal questions get deflected or redirected. This is not shyness, this is structure. Psychologist Sidney Girard was one of the first researchers to document that healthy intimacy is built on mutual self-disclosure, a gradual, two-way exchange of personal information that deepens on both sides. Irwin Altman and Dalmas Taylor formalized this in their social penetration theory in 1973. The more symmetric the exchange, the more genuine the relationship. When one person consistently discloses deeply and the other does not, what you have is a structural power imbalance. One person becomes emotionally exposed, the other remains protected. A 1994 meta-analysis by Collins and Miller found that people who extract self-disclosure from others while withholding their own demonstrate a more transactional, instrumental orientation towards relationships. This doesn't automatically mean they'll betray you, but it does mean they haven't genuinely invested in you. And when a choice has to be made between your interests and their own, the calculus will be much easier for them than it would be for someone who's truly mutually vulnerable with you. So, 3 psychological patterns that research links to untrustworthy behavior in close relationships. 1. Chronic emotional dysregulation. Impulsivity that under pressure overrides loyalty and commitment. 2. Manipulative victimhood combined with exploitative traits. You are a resource in the relationship, not a person. 3. Persistent asymmetric self-disclosure. They know you, you don't know them. One important thing before you go. None of this is a verdict on another person's character. People are genuinely complex, and these patterns can coexist with real care and real struggle. What I'm giving you is a lens, not a courtroom. But if you're seeing 2 or all 3 of these patterns consistently over time, that's worth paying attention to. It's worth being more intentional about how much of yourself you open up. Drop a comment below. Which of these patterns have you encountered? I read every one. If this was useful, a like helps this reach people who actually need it. Subscribe if you want more psychology that cuts straight to what matters. Take care of yourself and trust thoughtfully. See you in the next one.